For our opening keynote, we're pleased to introduce children's media consultant Sarah Chumsky, who will be presenting Growing Up and Bouncing Back, the 3 R's for the pandemic: review, recalibrate, and recover.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Chumsky. I've been working as a children's researcher for about 15 years, and I do work for a lot of media companies, toy companies, and nonprofits. I like to say that I help to bring the voice of kids and their families into the creative process. Before research, I worked in production and development for educational media at places like Sesame Workshop and Blue's Clues. I'm excited to kick off this unconference today with a talk about child development and how we can help our kids during this challenging time. I vow to keep this presentation upbeat and solution-oriented. We've all heard a ton of bad news in the past few months, but we've also had some success stories. And I'd like to continue that positive momentum. So let's get started. First, why we're here. I'm sure you've heard people talk about the 3 R's when it comes to education: reading, writing, and arithmetic. I'd like to introduce the revised 3 R's for dealing with our current situation: review, recalibrate, and recover. I'll go into these in detail, but for now, just know that we're going to get a handle on some of the timeless truths about child development, what's true now and needs to be considered in the time of the pandemic, and what we should be doing next. I'm going to start with a quick overview of child development. We tend to bucket kids' growth into 3 areas: physical, cognitive, and social-emotional. There are typical milestones within each of these buckets that parents and educators key into when they're dealing with kids. These milestones are helpful, but of course we know that every child is different. Every child develops on their own schedule and at their own individual pace. And we also know that these skill sets are interrelated in how they manifest and may also depend on the personality of the child. So a kid who is feeling overly challenged in too many cognitive or physical areas may be affected social-emotionally. They may lose confidence and the urge to try. But another child with a different personality, with a lot of physical or cognitive challenges, may dig in their heels and try harder. So as people who love and work with kids, we need to keep an eye on which mindset our kids naturally have, so that we can help them make progress at their own pace. So let's look at the progression. We all know that for kids with special needs, we can't focus on the exact age that a child is supposed to reach a milestone, but we do want to help them make progress in each area. When it comes to the physical, we want to help them develop gross and fine motor skills and work toward mastery as best they can. And you'll see in this art example, a child getting more and more detailed and even developing a style by the end. Cognitively, we want to help kids taking on tasks that are increasingly complex and nuanced, like absorbing stories that are one layer, like a Blue's Clues, or have subplots, or following characters that are simply good guys or bad guys, versus understanding a more nuanced story with lots of gray areas, like a Harry Potter, where there's a Professor Snape who could be a good guy or could be a bad guy, depending on the part of the story, and he actually has a little bit of both. Same goes with layering complexities in other subjects like math and science. And social-emotionally, we go from kids having play dates that are set up by their parents to having playmates where they choose their own friends. And eventually posses, where kids are connected by our common interests, like the kids on the soccer team or the other kids in the drama club. We at first see our kids playing side by side, then in small groups, and then finding that group of friends. As kids get more social, they also start to specialize, moving from being more process-oriented to being product-oriented, really caring if what they're doing comes out right or is as expected or as they want it to be. So no presentation about kids is complete without meeting a few cute kids. So here first is Quentin. He's 12 years old. He's from Brooklyn. He has autism. And like every kid, he has his own development trajectory. Physically, he was quite late in learning to walk. I think he was about 2 when he finally got the hang of it. But now he swims and he ice skates. and he rides horses. He just learned to tie his own shoes actually a few weeks ago during the pandemic, during lockdown. His mom was really proud, and his dad. Cognitively, he's a good reader. Plus, he's teaching himself ASL, which you can see in that middle photo. And he has an unbelievably strong memory. Socially, he doesn't converse much. He does a lot of scripting, repeating back things he's heard from YouTube videos or TV shows or movies. But he does have close relationships with his teachers and his classmates. And he recently just, according to his mom, finally made a best friend, which is developmentally appropriate. And this is new for him and exciting for him and exciting for his family. He's a perfect example of how a kid can develop in very nuanced ways at their own pace. What's really happening when kids develop physically, cognitively, and socially, emotionally is that kids are developing their identity. To figure out who they are and who they want to be, they're constantly exploring. They're trying new things. Maybe they want to play an instrument or try soccer. In trying these things, they learn what they enjoy and what they're good at. And then they put these aspects of identity out into the world to express them. And sometimes they do this in person. And for other kids, they do it maybe through social media. They get feedback on these aspects of their identity, and they decide what they want to keep. Maybe they get positive feedback and they're like, yeah, I am a musician. I'm good at this. I love this. Or I'm not so good at sports. Maybe I'll try the school play instead. And this explore express cycle is continuous, even through adulthood, but it's very, very intense during childhood. Feedback from parents and teachers is always important throughout a child's life. But as kids enter school and become more peer-oriented, feedback from peers also increases in weight. Now, our job in all of this is to allow our kids the space to experience this process without too heavy a hand. We can encourage exploration, we can expose them to things, provide opportunities for them to discover interests and passions, and we can provide our feedback. And we can also help them understand and navigate the feedback that they may get from outsiders, which sometimes can be supportive and sometimes cannot always be expressed in the most productive way. Let's move into recalibrate. We reviewed the timeless truths about child development. Now it's time to rethink. Clearly, there's a lot going on right now that's different from normal. We're all very stressed out about very real things. Kids are not blind to this. They feel it. They see it. Every possible routine has been disrupted, from work to school to grocery shopping to leisure time and our hobbies. And even though we still have the internet, our day-to-day world has become very small, almost entirely inside our homes. So our expectations have changed. We've already done a lot of this recalibrating. We're all in survival mode right now. We're likely worried less about things like grades and deadlines, and we're thinking a lot more about physical health and social emotional well-being. The pandemic has brought the social benefits of school and work into really sharp focus. And we're stressed out because the physical closeness that we crave also puts our health in danger. We also need to recalibrate because children's behaviors have changed. We're seeing kids try to process what's going on in their own way. Like Tomas, who's in the photo on the left. He's bringing social distancing into his pretend play. He's building buildings out of Lego that have to be closed because of the virus. He's also, and you can see this in the photo, creating parades in honor of what's going on right now, where he's separating all of his vehicle toys and his action figures in a socially distanced way. For some kids, they're also regressing during this time. Now that their parents are home all the time, and maybe this has something to do with the stress they're feeling from these uncertain times from their parents. Lila, who's 5, is asking for extra cuddling time from her parents. She's also using a ton of baby talk, and she's even started pretending to breastfeed in some of her pretend play. Social emotionally, we need to recalibrate because new worries have emerged among kids. To unpack this a bit, let's go back to what we know about comprehension. When trauma or disruption happens, preschoolers will only understand the basics. And that's why all they really need to know are the basics here. Many preschoolers are actually happy to be home with their parents more. And when they ask questions, they tend to be very, very simple, like why we have to wash our hands so much or why we can't go visit grandma today. Bigger kids, as you'll see in the quotes on the right, are trying to better understand the uncertainty and the sadness that's going on. While some of them may be exploring these kinds of themes in movies and books, it's a totally different story when it's happening in their real life. Their concerns range from routine things like losing their baseball season to bigger things like worrying about their pets, worrying about their grandparents, even finding out, is the virus near us? Are we in danger? For teens, the stress is, of course, even more intense since they typically have a better sense of what's going on in the greater world. And they don't yet have the emotional maturity that adults have typically for dealing with all of this. That said, for some kids with learning differences, there is a silver lining. Being at home has been beneficial to them. They've discovered new ways of learning that work better for them. Here's a quote from a teen who struggles with anxiety and has autism. And the child explains that the 2 to 3 hours of remote learning that they're doing now is actually much less stressful than the 8 hours in school because there aren't a lot of disruptions from other kids and the stress of having people around them all day, which is a difficult thing for this particular child to deal with. So what's really happening here again? Now, during this pandemic, well, the identity development cycle is happening differently, just like everything else in the world right now. The identity development cycle is being disrupted for many children who need experiences that are in person or outside the home in order to explore their interests. And it's being especially disrupted for kids who don't have access to technology and the internet. That said, other kids are reveling in the extra time they may have to explore things or dig more deeply into passions. Changes in their schedule or lifestyle are opening up windows for this kind of thing. But for all kids, this cycle is happening in a more physically isolated way, which is affecting how they can express themselves. They're getting less feedback. They can share to Google Classroom or post something online, but that natural, less formal interaction with people that happens when you're talking to someone at school or hanging out at a birthday party or getting your hair cut, that's gone for the time being. So, last step, recover. This all sounds very dire, but I do want to deliver the important message of calmness. That's the only way we can get through this. And also taking action so we can feel like we're not just getting through it, but we're actually making some progress and helping. So first, step 1, take stock of where you are, which is the review. Think about all those aspects of physical, cognitive, and social emotional development. Where is this child, regardless of what's typical? Is the child process-oriented or product-oriented? What complexity of material are they ready for? Do they need happy endings? Or are they ready for a bigger dose of reality with endings in stories or that are more ambiguous or even sad? Are they on track in some areas? Which areas are more challenging? Are they having trouble exploring or expressing? What's their personality like? How are they approaching all of these new routines and challenges? What aspects of learning from home are actually an improvement for this child, and which may require you to change your expectations or develop a new approach. Then step 2, once you know where your student is at, you can start to take positive action. First, recalibrate. Know that even if you've already changed your expectations, you may have to do it again and again. As parents and teachers of students with special needs, you've probably gotten pretty good at this already. So this is really just a reminder. Obviously, no regrets are necessary. Whatever you've done is excellent. We all know how important it is to pat ourselves on the back for the hard work that we do. As part of this recalibration, consider the importance of routine. For some kids, you may discover that a more relaxed schedule is something that helps them thrive. They can sleep late, maybe. They can tackle challenging assignments when they're ready for it mentally, in the right mindset. For other kids, routine is essential. So even if the routine is different now, you still must have some kind of routine. Also, know that when this is over, kids who thrive on routine will consider the time we're in now to be their current routine. So when we switch back to going to brick and mortar schools, we're obviously going to have to do that transition again for them and ease them back in. I know already some schools and teachers with special needs students are thinking ahead about how they want to do this transition. Next, find the right time to begin your recovery. For each development area, seek out lessons and material that speak to the current level and needs of your student. You want the challenges to feel just right. Embrace the nuance in different levels for different development areas and different subjects. And of course, reach out to your communities for your best ideas and advice. And finally, remember that wherever your child is in terms of developmental milestones and identity development, every child can benefit from the ongoing explore, express cycle. I know this is more challenging while we're all distancing, but if you're going to carve out any extra time to lean in with your child or student, helping with their exploration and self-expression could be among the more important things that you do for them. What can you try that's new? What can you dig into more deeply that they're already into? How can they show what they know and love and get meaningful feedback from you and others and find a cohort of people who share their interests? And that's it. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. If you have further questions, the conference directors can let you know where to direct them. You can also find me on LinkedIn. And I hope that the Unconference gives you the inspiration and the tools that you need for your students and your kids during this remote learning period. And I wish you all the very best.